This is the third episode of Bloodstains and Breakthroughs, which is my podcast slash my book. And today's theme is quite an emotional one for me, so bear with me. But it's more about what happens after survival mode ends. Today, I want to talk about something that nobody prepared me for. What happens after you survive? I spent years working crime scenes, standing in rooms that very few people ever saw, standing still in the chaos on the worst days of people's lives, and it's laid out in front of me to watch. I fell apart much later when my body finally felt safe enough to fall apart. This episode is about delayed trauma, chronic illness, and what happens when that strong friend finally stops being strong. I have mentioned multiple times that I have CPTSD and trauma has taken my memory. And I started this podcast because I'm afraid of forgetting my own life. Actually, I started writing my book because I was afraid of forgetting my own life. And I realized that based upon the research of my medical stuff, that I probably only had 2 years to live to tell my story. And that's why I started the podcast, because my story needed to get out faster than what I thought I had to live. So I live with CPTSD, and memory loss is a part of that. Some memories are crystal clear, I'm not going to lie to you, but others never existed. Never. Until somebody tells me, hey, do you remember something? That's when I'll remember. But in all honesty, I don't remember most of my life, which is insane to me. So this podcast is how I'm kind of preserving what mattered to me, not in the details, but more in the meaning and the lessons that I learned and the wisdom that I can pass on to others. As a child, I was the daughter of a father who wanted nothing to do with her, the daughter of a emotionally immature mother. So I learned how to compartmentalize, and I learned how to compartmentalize fast. And what I didn't realize until I was in my 30s is that my entire personality, my entire life, my entire career, my entire identity is a trauma response. So when I became a crime scene investigator, it was no big deal for me to compartmentalize. Comfort Kitty is coming. Oh, I have an emotional support cat. Listen, I have emotional support animals, and then I've only had one, and then my emotional support animal needed an emotional support animal, and then that one needed an emotional support animal, and now I run a zoo. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. So I still think they all need emotional support. But this is Jerry. Hi, Jerry. I was 385 pounds and in better health than I ever was when I was skinny. I had more health problems. I went to more hospital trips. I had more surgeries when I was skinny. Ironically hilarious that one of my crime scenes, Swiss cheese lady, had 21 bullet holes in her, and now I have 21 scars on me. Just in my abdomen, because why not be a pincushion just because your nervous system's jacked? What I didn't realize at the time was that because I would go home from my crime scenes and I had compartmentalized it, that I was never actually processing it. And there's a major book called The Body Keeps Score. And it basically talks about how, although your body doesn't, your brain may not remember, your body processes things. And I remember I've been labeled the angry friend, the angry daughter. I'm so angry. I'm so blunt. I'm so mean. I am the sweetest person. But what I realized was the adrenaline dumps from no longer being in crime scenes was stored in my nervous system. I realized after leaving crime scene that my nervous system was shot when I was crying over absolutely nothing, over little things. I would lash out in anger. Oh, lost a light. I would lash out in anger over nothing. And I couldn't understand why now. Why is my body failing me now? Why am I crying now? I've stood over dead bodies and didn't cry. I was a crime scene investigator. I'm tougher than this. I'm the strong friend. You don't have to worry about me. Until they had to worry about me. I had left being a crime scene investigator and had a stable job. I had a six-figure income, and life was going what I thought was well until it wasn't. And I remember thinking, like, why now? Why am I having so many issues with my body, so many medical issues? And I realized that it was the first time in my life that my body had felt safe enough to express the amount of pain that I truly was in. I was diagnosed with POTS and dysautonomia, and my body could no longer regulate itself. I would stand up, I would get dizzy, heat would make me nauseous, eating insufferable, and my energy gone, like zapped. I was 30 years old and vibrant, and then I was all of a sudden diagnosed bipolar. I was diagnosed with ADHD after having zero symptoms ever because of the brain fog associated with this. I lost my career because of POTS. And I'm 100,000% convinced it's because of COVID. But we're not going to go down that conspiracy yet. But if you enjoy conspiracy theories, continue to listen to Bloodstains and Breakthroughs. And with my body not being able to sustain itself, I lost my identity. Everything that I'd worked so hard for, the career, the relationship, the friend group, the support system, everything crumbled. And low key, I'm not gonna lie to you, I burned that bridge on purpose. On purpose. And we'll dive into that. But I couldn't even trust my own body. This was no longer a physical ailment. This was an existential crisis in my life. Somewhere in all of this disaster, I found God. And that's weird for me to say because I did not grow up religious in the slightest. I had attended church here and there. My mom primarily went after my sister was murdered for answers, which I don't think she found. I hope she finds her answers. I excommunicated my mother in all of this too. So, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. But we'll discuss that in another podcast episode of Bloodstains and Breakthroughs. This is the breakthrough that I want to leave you with today is that healing does not make things quieter, it makes things clearer. I'm loud about my healing now, and I'm loud as fuck with my healing now because you almost lost me in silence. And I have to tell my story because I refuse to let that happen again. Not to myself and not to anybody else. I was once the strong friend that got weak and lost everything. But then I went on a healing journey and I found myself. I found so much more. And if any part of this podcast has resonated with you, I want you to know that you're not alone, first off. You're not weak for asking for help, secondly. And you don't owe anybody access to you just because they're in your life, they're your family, they're your friends. You don't owe anybody access. You don't owe anybody anything. You know what? I am one of those people. I chase evidence. I'm a crime scene investigator. So evidence is like existential for me. And I'd had evidence so many times. And I chose to ignore it to see the good in people. And that only hurt me. To wrap up Bloodstains and Breakthroughs, episode 3, I just want to say that if you ever have thoughts about exiting the planet, know that that is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It does get better. I will tell you more about my conversation with God in another episode because it was messy. Ooh, it was messy. But if you're struggling right now, reach out. My inbox is open. Other people's inboxes are open. The helpline is there. You're not alone, and you are so very loved. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Bloodstains and Breakthroughs. This has been incredible. I love you. My name is Christina. Thank you for joining.